Hey everybody, our guest speaker is here, Senator Caleb Rowden, out of Boone County and Callaway County. You started your political career in what, 2012?
2012, yeah.
How was it then, compared to now?
I was in 28 at the time, so.
Come on out, step
Okay,
here and
all
sit
right.
right in the line of fire.
So, yeah, I was 28 at the time, had no idea really what I was doing, for
But
the
see,
most part, so.
in one of your bios, it says that's your greatest asset. You weren't a politician.
Yeah, and we ran on that, and, I guess it worked.
You have a photography business.
My wife has a photography business. I have a marketing company, she has a photography
Okay,
business.
that's it, that's it.
Yeah.
In 2016, that's when you went to the
Went
Senate?
to the Senate, yep.
How was that race?
It was the most expensive Senate race ever in the history of the state by almost 2 times.
Well, you were going against 2 incumbents, if I'm.
I was going against, in my House race, I was going against
Okay.
two former senators. Then my Senate race, I was running against another House member. So it was a dogfight, but I won by about 2,000 votes out of 60,000 or so cast. So.
Well, we appreciate you being here, but let me warn you a little bit about the people in this audience.
Okay.
Majority of them are criminal justice majors, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
They're good people.
Yeah.
Pretty conservative in nature, just the nature of the beast kind of for this profession. But we were hoping you'd talk to us about policy and the relationship between policy at your level and the criminal justice issues that face the great state of Missouri.
Great.
So you've got 5 minutes. Can you do it?
Sure.
Plus more. We got Caleb, we got pizza coming up.
I'll do whatever
there.
you want me to do.
Have you had dinner yet?
Kind of.
You want a piece of pizza?
No, I'm
something
okay.
to
I'm okay.
drink?
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to Senator Caleb Rowden. Thank you so much. Let's give him a round of applause.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Sorry I'm late. I got lost on your campus, so that's my fault. But pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be able to speak to you. If I warn the folks who walked me up, if I say anything really stupid tonight, we had a 14-hour filibuster in the Senate last night. So we started at 2 or so, and I got home and laid my head on my pillow at 4 a.m. And then got back up at about 7 to go back to Jeff City. So I'm running on fumes a little bit. So hopefully we say some good stuff. But so I thought what I'd do is just maybe talk a little bit about me, kind of how I got where I am, and then I'll talk about some of the policy stuff that maybe you guys care about, and then certainly want to leave time for questions if you guys have them. So I was born in Joplin, moved to Columbia in 1990. I was 8 years old at the time. I came up through the public schools, graduated from Rockbridge High School. I went to the University of Missouri and was going to college and was doing a kind of hobby music career at the same time. By a little luck and a little virtue, got offered a record deal by Warner Brothers when I was 19. They said, "Hey, we'd love to sign you. You get to go out and you get to tour the country, but you can't go to college at the same time." And so I made that decision and started touring the country. Did that for about 7 years full time, and then married my wife in 2005. We have 2 kids. Willem is going to be 7 in a couple weeks. Adele is a little over a year old, and they're both pretty awesome. As was stated, I own a marketing company. My wife owns a photography company, and we've been married about almost 16 years, something like that. I should probably know that number. I obviously grew up in Columbia, but when I started touring, I was just gone all the time. We played the first year I was married, I was on the road 222 days out of that year. So as you can imagine, that can be stressful. So I was on the road a lot, and so while Columbia was my home, and I lived there all of my adult life, just had never really put down roots in the way that I felt like I should. And so in 2009-ish, 2009, 2010, I thought, hey, maybe I'll do something to change that. And so we were kind of winding down our touring activities. And so I started my company, joined the Chamber of Commerce, joined the Rotary Club, do the stuff that you would do kind of to engage a little bit more. And I had a couple folks come to me as I was building some of those relationships, and they said, hey, maybe you should run for office. And I was really surprised by that, because at the time, as I said, I was 27, 28. I had like a lot crazier hair because I was still kind of had the musician mentality. And they said run for office. I'm like, I didn't really know what it was that made them think that I should do that. But we checked into it, looked into it, met with some folks who were engaged in politics at the local level, and we explored an idea of running for city council in Columbia. And then there were two new House seats that were going to be in place because Boone County had grown by so much. They redraw the lines every 10 years based on the census, and Boone County grew, so they got two new districts. And so those would be two districts that there weren't incumbents. And as you can imagine, it's always easier to not have to beat an incumbent in any race. And so I ran for the 44th District House race, which is Northeast Columbia, Northeast Boone County, and then just a sliver of Randolph County, and won that in 2012. Very, very, very close race in the primary and in the general. Served 2 terms in the House, and then won my Senate race in 2016. And so now this is beginning of my 4th session in the Missouri Senate. At the end of 2018, I was elected the Senate Majority Leader, which is the top partisan position in the Senate. So the makeup of the Senate, there are 34 of us, 34 senators. We all represent roughly about 180,000 individuals, everywhere from some folks only have part of one county to there's some folks who have 8 or 9 counties in more rural Missouri. And so was elected to that leadership position in 2018. And then last session was my first session in that position. So basically the role of Senate Majority Leader is anything that comes to the floor has to go through me. So all of the things that we're bringing to the floor for debate, I control when it comes, I control how long we stay on it, and everything like that. And so it's a really tough job, to be honest, because obviously, as you can imagine, people have priorities. They have things that they want to get done. But they know that all the roads run through me, and so there's people banging on you all the time to say, hey, I want to bring my thing up. I got the best idea in the world, and you should do this. So my view of my role in Jefferson City changed quite a bit when I took that role on, because when you first get into it and you don't have any position like this, it's just, hey, my priorities are what I'm wanting to accomplish. So. I always wanted to try to find a way to, make our economy better, try to find ways to provide more educational opportunities for kids, and try to find ways to make communities safer. That's what I ran on all the way back in 2012. I think it's a message that resonated then, continues to resonate now. My position now, though, kind of forces me to say, okay, what used to be me looking at kind of the micro is now me looking at the macro, because in the Senate, everybody has, and as last night being a prime example, there is no time limit on how long somebody can speak, and so if one person has enough willpower and enough bladder control, they can stand up on the floor and talk for as long as they want on any one thing. They don't have to talk about the subject matter. In the House, there's a rule that says, hey, if you're gonna talk about a bill that talks about a tax cut, then you've got to talk about that policy. Whereas in the Senate, somebody can just pick up a book and start reading, which actually happens quite a bit. And so the Senate dynamic is such that there are 34 individuals, 34 silos, 34 people who all have various size egos, most of which are quite large, and they think that they're the best thing since sliced bread. So my position is, okay, there's a bunch of people who have a bunch of good ideas, some not good ideas, but a lot of priorities that they care about. And so my role is to say, okay, figure out what we think we can accomplish, what's realistic, what fits into, you know, kind of the priorities of the majority party, but then also how does us working on this issue and kind of building coalitions on this issue affect how we build a coalition on the next issue? Because, you know, last night the issue was a pretty partisan one, but the next one won't be. The next one will be, you know, an issue that probably the nature of the Senate as it is right now, there's 23 Republicans, 8 Democrats, and then there are 3 vacant positions that have just come to be vacant. So our Missouri Senate is really kind of, I describe it as Democrat, Republican, and then the really, really Republican. And so that's where kind of our battle lines are, if you will. And so it's a really unique position to be in, and you always have to see the big picture. And I think my role now forces me to think about, okay, yes, I still want to make sure that I'm speaking for, reflecting, advocating for folks in Boone and Cooper counties, but now you really have to take a statewide view of how you're doing what you're doing, because you know, we're you know, doing things that obviously impact rural Missouri, St. Louis, Kansas City, and all over the place. And so it's a really neat, it's been really neat. It's been a really fun opportunity, not anything that I ever thought I'd be doing. You know, people ask, what's next? What do you run for next? And I say nothing, but I never thought I'd be doing this in the first place. And so, you know, you just have to kind of sit back and take what comes to you. But so I want to talk a little bit about kind of some of the stuff that we've done in criminal justice, and you know, kind of what I see to have been a little bit of an evolution in thought and an evolution of how folks have viewed this. So, you know, in 2012, which was my first exposure, obviously, to public office, I sensed even then maybe that there was people were beginning to see this issue set a little bit differently. I think part of it is because of data and kind of analytics being more involved in the process. What used to be, let's be tough on crime for the sake of being tough on crime, now has become, let's be more smart with how we do what we do, how we sentence people. Is everybody supposed to go to prison, or are there other sorts of kind of intermediary steps that can be taken? And so I actually have worked on 2 or 3 criminal justice bills myself that have really been aimed at trying to tackle some of those things. And so in 2017, which was my first year in the Senate, the then governor appointed a lady named Ann Precythe to be the corrections director here in Missouri. She came from North Carolina, and we were tasked with a challenge in that the prison population in Missouri was continuing to grow, and if it were to continue on its same trajectory, we were going to have to build 2 new prisons in the scope of a 5 to 7 year window at the cost of $500 million and a whole lot of ongoing maintenance, you know, as far as dollars for the state. And so part of Director Precythe's charge from then Governor Greitens was to say, how do we reverse that trend? We have to reverse that trend. We can't afford to continue to go down this road, but also being mindful of the fact that, hey, maybe what we're doing in policy and how we're treating you know, these various situations and circumstances isn't exactly right either. And so there's the symptom, and then there's the outcome. And so we're trying to figure out, hey, we can't get here, but you can't fix this without trying to fix, you know, the root cause of the problem. And so one of the things that we did, she initiated, and I led the charge on something called the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, which was designed to use sort of a new approach to sentencing, and a new approach to trying to save money within the Department of Corrections that could be turned around and used to help folks with trying to make sure that they didn't recidivate, making sure that there are opportunities for them to have mental health resources where they are in their communities. There was a whole host of things that was put into place. And so at that point, and my numbers won't be exactly right, but at one point there was upwards of 40,000 prisoners in the state, and I think as of today, that number is about 26,500, 27,000, something like that. And so, and actually the reverse happened, and there were two prisons up close to northwest Missouri that were kind of close to each other, served a bit of a different purpose, but actually one of those prisons has now closed. And so, we went from potentially having to open two, and now that we've closed one, and I think that the trend is in the right direction. I think what now we are looking at, and we've done a lot of other things. We passed a really big expungement law last year that was a huge bipartisan effort, actually sponsored by a Democrat from Kansas City. We've done a number of really, I think, interesting and innovative things in the area of criminal justice reform. I think what the next, based on the conversations that I've had in this space, I think the next thing that we're going to have to tackle is understanding, I think we all understand of it, but making sure that public policy differentiates between violent crime and nonviolent crime in a meaningful way, right? So I think the general consensus of the world at large and society is, nonviolent offenders, we want to provide every opportunity for them to have, chances to rehab and recoup and get the help that they need in some cases, whether it's, opioid abuse help, whether it's prescription help, whether it's, mental health help. Not everybody that is a nonviolent offender in a certain area is supposed to go to prison, and in fact, most of them maybe shouldn't. But I think there is now, because of the and it's pretty prominent in Missouri right now, the conversation, because of the spike in violent crime. I think there is kind of everybody's kind of stepping back and saying, okay, we've drawn these lines and we've kind of taken this step forward into this new frontier of criminal justice reform, but let's make sure we're drawing the line and kind of putting the partition where it's supposed to be. And so there is a senator from Platte County, which is a little bit north of Kansas City, who's working on some stuff this year related to trying to fix some of those problems, because I do think we've had some instances. There's I want to say he quotes the number. I think it's maybe 10 or 11 instances in the last 5 or 6 years in Missouri that, because of a little tweak in our laws, that 10 or 11 folks who have been convicted of second-degree murder have never served a day in prison. And so I think you find you're trying to find the balance between what I just said about nonviolent offenders and providing, kind of compassionate, grace-filled sort of opportunities for them to get back to where they need to be, become contributing members of society, but make sure that we're not swinging the pendulum so far that violent people, who in most cases just fundamentally see the world differently, we're not opening the door for them to do stuff that obviously is not good for our communities. And so I think that's something that we're working on this year, and I think I think this issue is particularly unique for a couple of reasons. In all of my time in Jefferson City, and we've worked on various criminal justice things literally every year that I've been there, it's never partisan. People disagree, as to, everybody wants to get to the same place for the most part. They obviously have disagreements about how you get there. But the disagreements aren't based on the letter behind the name in any instance. And I think that makes this kind of issue set in this issue area unique and special, and actually something that's really kind of invigorating to be a part of. Because, I say it all the time, 75, maybe 80% of the things that we deal with down there are bipartisan. I mean, most things that when they come to a vote in the Missouri Senate, it is rare, frankly, that there is a party line vote. And so this is one area where it fits into that category, but it's also a really big deal, right? We're not just talking about, some smaller thing for a little community or something like that people vote for just because. This is something that has huge consequences, and the magnitude of it for so many lives around our state, it's a big deal. And so to have it have that sort of magnitude, but then also have that level of engagement, that level of support from Republicans and Democrats is something that's just been really cool to watch. So I think what I think kind of the next frontier is I think people now are beginning to understand. You see, I think technology has changed this space quite a bit. Obviously, there are plenty of instances where actions and things have been caught on camera that help inform kind of how we see this area with law enforcement and everything else. And I think change is hard, and some of this stuff, this evolution, it doesn't always, it's not always comfortable for everybody, but I think it's necessary. And I think as our society continues to evolve, as we begin to kind of just understand some of the issues that these folks deal with in kind of the criminal justice space, you got to be open to, hey, maybe what the solution that we thought worked 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 2 years ago, maybe it doesn't work today. And so, state government, federal government is notoriously slow. We do everything. We're behind in everything. We're not proactive anywhere. And so I think that's the challenge and the opportunity for us in this space, is that if we get it right, the sooner we get it right, and if we do get it right, then there's a lot of people whose lives can be pretty dramatically changed as a result. And so, I'm optimistic. Our state is it's a unique place. The geography obviously provides some tremendous opportunities for us. We for anybody that was paying attention in 2017, the first part of 2018, there was a lot of volatility with the governor who resigned. The new governor is a really, really good, just a really good guy, Mike Parson, a former sheriff, was served in the Army, and just kind of a no-nonsense, what you see is what you get, guy who's never thought he'd be in this position. And so, I think when you, kind of the position that I'm in, if you never thought you were going to be there, and you didn't do things that were motivated by your ambition, it allows you to make decisions for the right reasons. And I think that's one thing that has been interesting for me to see down there. The Missouri legislature is a very unique place. It's a part-time legislature, so most of us have other jobs. We get paid $35,000 a year, which is, not nothing, but it's not, you probably can't raise a family on that more times than not. And so, but the diversity of backgrounds is really, really unique. You got farmers, you've got teachers, you've got retired individuals, you've got business owners, you cover the gamut. And so I think that is kind of a unique qualification and characteristic of our state government, is that, if we don't go into it with a lot of preconceived ideas, we don't go into it more times than not thinking we know everything, because we're asked to vote on and know about a lot of different things that before we got to Jefferson City, we had no reason to know anything about for the most part. And so just watching that, being a part of that, and seeing the quality of character of a lot of the folks in Jefferson City, and our relationship with the governor, who I hold in high regard, has been really, really something that's been special. I think the last thing I'd say, I'd love to answer questions after this. I don't think it's any secret that our political environment's a little funky at the moment. That might be a weird way of saying it, but I got into politics. I don't know why I got into politics, but that's another story. But no, I got into politics because at that time, I had a young family. Had a year-old little boy now who's now much, much older. And, you think about, okay, you've got 60, 70, 80 years on this earth. That's a lot of time, but it's not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things. And so, what do you do to make a mark? What do you do to leave a legacy? What do you do to make sure that, when I'm 65 or 70 and hopefully playing golf on a course in Florida, what have I done to make sure that my kids and the world that they have is better than the one I had? And so, there are any number of ways that you can work in a positive manner to answer that question. But my advice is you use that as the lens. And if in whether it's criminal justice, whether it's politics, whatever it is, there is no substitute for respecting people. There's no substitute for saying, okay, there are people who I interact with on a daily basis who I know I disagree with. I walk into the Missouri Senate every day knowing that there are people who probably don't like me that day for some reason and who definitely aren't going to agree with all of the positions that I hold. And so if you walk in to an environment like that, whether it's politics or anything else, with kind of this preconceived, us versus them, me versus the world sort of mentality, you get what we've got now, which is this really galvanized, really polarized world in which if I'm right, everybody else has to be wrong. But the reality of the world isn't really like that, frankly. And so my hope is, and what I've tried to do in the position that I've been afforded in the Senate and leadership is, we're going to try to pass good stuff. We're going to try to make sure that the policies that we put in place, benefit the people of Missouri, that we can explain why that is and hopefully see the tangible benefits of that. But I'm also going to use whatever platform and power I have to try to get folks to respect each other a little bit more. And to the greatest extent possible, I can't change what's going on in Washington and wouldn't even want to try. But there's an opportunity here. There's an opportunity in Missouri to make a difference and let folks know, hey, when you look at your state government, whether you're a Democrat and you don't like the fact that there's a bunch of Republicans there or vice versa, you can still look at it and be proud that we work together, we're civil, we respect each other, we speak highly of each other. And that's what we get in the Missouri Senate every day. I mean, I can't remember a time in my 4 years there that I sat back and watched two members disrespect each other and really use some sort of disagreement to lead into a personal space. You just don't see it. And so I think that's why I like this. This is something that is appealing to me because that's my mentality and that's kind of how I see the world. And so my advice is, it's important to, whatever you are doing, the what is really, really important, but the how is really, really important too. And so, the only way that the polarization and the crap that we're seeing, kind of around the country right now, the only way that gets better is if young folks like you say, hey, we're going to do this a little bit differently. We look at this and we don't like what we see, so, your only two responses to that are disengage and say that, well, I can't make any difference anyway, or to engage and say, to the greatest extent possible, however I can be involved, I'm going to do it in a way that kind of goes against the norm. And so I see that a lot in Jefferson City, and that's what excites me about the next, whatever the next decade or so looks like. And I'll be gone pretty soon, and I'll go back just to being a normal dude. But hopefully you can leave a mark, and hopefully that there can be some things that really do impact Missouri for the positive. So love to take questions.
A normal dude? I'm not buying it. What are the most critical issues facing the state of Missouri right now from a policy level for criminal justice?
Yeah, I mean, I think the probably the balance that I kind of talked about between making sure that the policy reflects our new view of how we handle, this space. You've got some stuff that's in the area of sentencing, some stuff in the area of kind of bail policy even that is just kind of antiquated. And so it really is, and it probably covers the whole gamut of the criminal justice space, but it's just old stuff, right, that needs to be updated, that needs to be modernized based on either, a new view of the world or new information that allows us to understand what we're doing a little bit better.
How's Ann doing?
She's doing great. She's doing great. Yeah, like I said, I got to work with her pretty closely on the just reinvestment stuff, and she is a go-getter and somebody who really does. She did the exact same thing in North Carolina. North Carolina was on the same track. She reversed the trend pretty dramatically and just changed the mindset, right?
She's an outside of the box kind of.
She really is. She really is.
Now, the Pell Plus is a big thing with us right now. The Pell Plus is a partnership that we're working with the Department of Corrections to take college education into the facilities. Hopefully 21 of them once we get this done.
Oh, that's awesome.
It is.
That's great.
Yeah, use their iPad technology and just present our online program.
That's great. Yeah, and that's something, that the I think in the past there's been you try to do as little as is required to help folks who are trying to rehab and recoup and get back into society. Whereas now I think you're seeing to your point and what this program is kind of the more we do and the more proactive we are, the better the chance and the opportunity for these folks to get back out and live the life that they're supposed to be living, which is awesome. A lot of people outside of government see that, and so it's our hope that we can make sure that policy reflects that and dollars investment reflects that.
I don't know how to say this politically correct, but we probably have the best student body in the entire state.
I love it.
Right?
I love it.
Right?
Yeah. She agrees.
What you're talking about legacy. How important is commitment to service? How important has it been for you?
Yeah, it's the sole driver really, because I think when I first got into to the house and started public service, I don't think I had it, and it might sound bad, I don't think I had public service as the motivation in the way that I do now, because I hadn't lived it, and so I didn't really necessarily know what I was getting into. But it really is a calling, right? I mean, I think folks that do this and do it well and do it in a way that is a blessing and a help to their own life and not something that overtakes it, are the folks that see it as a calling and not as some sort of stepping stone to the next big thing, right? And you see the difference between those folks in Jefferson City, and like I said, there's a lot of great folks down there, but there are differences between how folks see what they're doing. And if again, as I said before, if decisions are based on ambition, usually that is pretty transparent, and that doesn't usually send you down a good path. I've always said, more times than not, and almost always, good policy is good politics, and we make decisions. It's not any great secret that when we think about a vote that we're taking, it's okay. Here's the inside of the building ramifications, and the outside of the building ramifications are, hey, can my opponent in the next election use this against me, lie about it or stretch it, to make it seem like it's something that it's not. My first year in the House, I was scared of my own shadow, didn't want to take any votes that were in any way controversial but then pretty quickly I realized, and partly because, hey, I didn't know how long I was going to be there. I didn't think I'd be around this long. You might as well just do what's right, do what you think's right. Something that you can explain to your constituents and you go back home, and then you can lay your head on your pillow at night and feel good about what you've done.
Term limitations. Has it had an impact on policy?
Absolutely, yeah. So, you know, the plus side, I guess, for me is if term limits weren't in place in Missouri, I wouldn't be there. Pretty good chance of that. So term limits, you know, swept out a whole generation of politicians who had been in Jefferson City, in some cases in the Senate for 40 years. And so, you know, we have the picture profiles of all the Missouri Senate chambers going back to I think the middle 1900s. And so, you know, in the 1960s, 1970s, and early 1980s, and even a little bit in the 90s, you know, the average age of Missouri Senate was probably 65 years old, whereas, you know, the last two elections that have happened in the Missouri Senate, the class of new senators, I'm 37. The guys that came in with me are 37, 38, 41, and then the guys that came in after that, some of those guys are even younger. And so it has certainly had a change in kind of the look and feel of what the legislature looks like, which means it's going to have an impact on policy, right? There's a bunch of issues down there that are not necessarily Republican, Democrat, they're generational. And you see that quite a bit. And so, yeah, it has changed quite a lot. And there are pros and cons. There's no doubt that in any state where term limits exist, and ours are somewhat short. You can serve 8 years in the House, which is 4 2-year terms, and 8 years in the Senate, which would be 2 4-year terms. Any state where there's term limits, you know, lobbyists and career staffers, they're just going to have more power because they have the knowledge. You know, if you're there long enough, and most people don't. Most lobbyists or most, you know, folks who have been in staff positions for a long time, they don't use it nefariously or maliciously, but if you have knowledge there, that gives you the chance to really be a part of those conversations. And so, yeah, it certainly has done what it was designed to do, no question about it.
How pressing in the state of Missouri is gun control right now, Second Amendment issues? So,
you know, I think the reality of where we are is, I try to describe it as this: if gun control, in the way that we probably most of us understand it, is the level one of that conversation. Level one in Missouri is probably not possible because.
Would you describe level one?
Well, I mean, you know, I think most of the various sorts of gun control things that are out there, and there's a whole host of them now, and some of them are less extreme than others, but because of the fact that there are huge Republican majorities in both chambers, you know, level one, where that would probably be some sort of maybe infringement's the wrong word, but some sort of potential push to undo or change the gun rights of law-abiding citizens, that probably is a no-go. So what we've tried to do, and Governor Parson has actually led really well on this, is say, okay, if level one's off the table, whether we like that or not, what are the level two opportunities, and or, you know, what level do you have to get to find consensus, right? And so there's a bunch of stuff. Governor Parson over the summer met a number of times with the mayors of the 4 largest cities, St. Louis, Kansas City, Columbia, Springfield, and said, hey, look, we know you have some violence, a lot of violence problems. Columbia is not immune by any means. We know that the gun thing is probably its own separate thing, and there probably is not going to be a lot of agreement. But let's look at what the problems are and try to find solutions that are attainable. And so that has kind of morphed into a conversation about more money for witness protection programs in St. Louis and Kansas City, where there is some organized crime in which, you know, if folks see something or hear something or know of something, they're so scared of retribution that they never come forward. That has been a really, really big problem in St. Louis specifically. And so there's that. Springfield's doing a pilot program on kind of a mental health sort of triage facility that because of the fact that there isn't anything in this space, folks who are potentially violent, that also have mental health issues, that their default has just been you just take them to jail. Well, if you take them to jail, law enforcement's there for a long time, and it's a drain on the system on a whole host of reasons. And so trying to find, again, the creative kind of modern way to treat a problem that's existed for a long time is something that we're looking at. So it's a really long answer, but it's a nuanced, it's a complex area, and so we know what we will disagree on, and so from my perspective, let's find the things that we can agree on and try to get those things done.
Questions? Carl, since you're back on campus, do you have anything you'd like to ask? I hate to put you on a spot like this, but you are a CMU grad. Welcome back. Any questions? Shirley, come on, something.
Not on the topic of criminal justice.
Sure.
On the topic of college students going to college and the Missouri Access Grant. And the fact that it continues to get smaller and smaller. And students at a school like Central Methodist, where we spend less than half to educate our students at the University of Missouri spends to educate their students.
Mm-hmm.
Yet our graduation statistics aren't more than double. We're fighting a losing battle when they continue to get the large universities that are state operated, continue to get more and more of my state tax dollars, and students who are working their butts off to go to college at a school like Central Methodist, William Woods, Westminster, Stevens, Columbia College, and they're continuing to get smaller and smaller grants.
Well, we can talk about that for a long time. It's a good question. So obviously I'm from Columbia, and so Mizzou is in the backyard. What I've seen in the last in my time there, I'll say that is and it's been I think a reflection of a changing mentality around just societally. Is there used to be the stigma that was if you didn't go to a school like Mizzou, if you went to a 2-year or whatever if it wasn't the big guy, that there was some sort of stigma around that, right? And so what I've seen, and there was always it's not a fight, but there's always tension between the 2 years and the 4 years in Jefferson City. That's something that kind of has existed as long as I've been there. But there's been this really significant change and evolution to say, okay, not everybody's supposed to go that route, right? And so I think that same rule applies in what you're talking about, in that we're starting to understand, and our ask of the big 4 years has been, hey, you can't be all things to all people, right? There are certain things that a school like the University of Missouri is really, really good at, right? And our charge to them has been, hey, we don't have, they still get a lot of money. They haven't got a core increase in the last 3 years. And the conversation has been, we write you a $420 million, for MU specifically, we write you a $420 million check every year. We think that's probably good enough. And so now what are you doing to say, okay, we're not going to be all things to all people. We're going to kick butt in this area, in this area, in this area. And then hopefully what comes from that is that there are opportunities for schools like this one and schools like Columbia College and Moberly Area Community College that's got a huge footprint in Columbia now, to say, okay, we can do the stuff that they're not doing. We can do it better. We can do it cheaper. We can do it more efficiently. And then the response to that then is for the state to understand, okay, now we've got to invest in those things. And so that means scholarships, right? Because if we say that all of that is true, which I think generally speaking most folks in Jefferson City, believe what you're saying, really, really do, then how we invest our money has to be a reflection of that. And I will say one thing that's always frustrated me specifically about education funding, and even more specifically higher education funding, is, when I first got there, it was schools would basically take Mizzou, if they got $400 million a year before, then they would, the bottom starting line for the next year would be $400 million plus the next whatever that was. And so the mentality that changed because of a buddy of mine who was the budget chairman at the time was, well, maybe you got 400 last year, but maybe you didn't earn the 400 as the starting place for next year. And so it actually became, we put performance funding measures in place and some other stuff. And so you're exactly right. And again, I'll say what I said before, we're slow to adapt to any of this stuff. And so, you know, my advice would be, if you can, to the greatest extent possible, you know, you build a coalition of schools and folks who can come down and speak that message, kind of united and louder. I think that does carry some weight, because there is no substitute for somebody coming from my district or close to my district and talking to me about an issue, right? Because I get people from all over the state, and frankly, in some instances all over the country, coming in and saying, hey, you should do ABC, and I'm going to listen to them. But if somebody's coming from my backyard and telling me something like you're telling me, I think that is higher on the precedent list and higher on the priority list. So,
Our student body president was just down there and testified on.
oh, good,
Tuesday.
awesome.
And then we are also, we're major instigators, and I think we are the largest private institution membership in the Keep Me in College Coalition. I don't know if
Awesome.
you're aware of that coalition.
I am a little
Of
bit.
the
Yeah,
Privates in Missouri,
Yep.
large and small.
Yep.
Washington and St. Louis, you are part
Yep.
of our coalition.
that's
too,
awesome.
To lobby the legislators.
Fantastic.
So I'm an economist and I teach here. Maybe if you frame things in the following way, if private higher education ended in the state of Missouri, and all of the students we teach then went to the public system, you would have a financial crisis in the state. I'm not so worried about giving us money. I'm just worried about policies that just make life harder and
Mhm.
harder and harder, including the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Causes huge problems for us. But if you could just find ways to appreciate the fact that we do a tremendous service for the state. We educate students, we give them a great education, but we save the state a huge amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
Because if all of those students tried to go to public schools in the state of Missouri, you
Yeah.
guys would have a
Wouldn't.
funding crisis. And I don't think the politicians realize the crisis they'd have if they managed to push private education out of business. And I'm not so much worried about the state, I'm worried about the federal level, because if Elizabeth Warren gets elected and manages to get her policy passed, small private colleges are out of business in this country.
It's good. What else?
So, then let me have a different one on criminal justice.
Yeah, sure.
Michael Tanner has a new book out, it came out last year, called The Inclusive Economy. Excellent book. He's got chapters, what needs to change in this country to bring the poor out. And one chapter is on criminal justice, and a huge focus of it is on drug policies. We have treated as legal in this country two of the most destructive drugs around. Nicotine delivered by cigarettes and alcohol. They kill huge numbers of people. But it's okay to use them if that's your drug of choice. If your drug of choice is something different, like marijuana or cocaine or heroin, we're going to put you in jail. And the fact is that the people for whom that's their drug of choice, that's a huge problem. And I don't understand why we don't focus on putting people in jail who harm other people, as opposed to people who just want to use their drug of choice, as opposed to someone else's. I would put to you that if marijuana were the drug of choice of Missouri teenagers, there'd be a whole lot more Missouri teenagers living today as compared to alcohol, given the number of kids who die in alcohol-related driving deaths.
So I would, we can talk about that all night too.
I'm gonna sit down.
I'd say a couple of things. You know, I mentioned earlier the R&D issues and then the generational issues. And I think probably that is one of those, right? In that, partly because I just think the societal view of it has changed a fair amount over the last, decade or however long it's been. But it was interesting to be a part of, or to be in the legislature while, the medical marijuana stuff was on the ballot in 2018, and now there's going to be a recreational marijuana on the ballot in 2020, I think. It was interesting to talk to fellow senators and reps about that, because we didn't put it on the ballot, and so obviously most of us weren't on the record. I think I've taken some votes for some CBD stuff, and we've done some work in that space in the Missouri House. But it was those are always interesting conversations, because I'll sit across the desk from a guy who's a 72-year-old senator, retired groceryman from Webster County, and you would think that he would have one view, one particular view, if you were stereotyping him, of the kind of general view of drug policy that you're talking about, and his view is exactly what yours was, which was, look, most folks in my neck of the woods don't love the fact that there, at that point, there was a pretty good chance that we were going to legalize medical marijuana. But he said, what's the differentiation between what they're seeking to do and what's happening with alcohol and nicotine, some of those other things, and then you have obviously most of the young folks that I talk to in Jefferson City, that they're there. They've been there for a long time. And I think the reality of what you're going to see, and it's going to happen, I mean, it is a tidal wave that is sweeping over the country, is that at some point in the not so distant future, I think it's legal everywhere, right? And it's not for medicinal purposes. It just is. I think there was a coalition of folks some of whom worked on the medical marijuana policy in 18 that was on the ballot, that now has announced that they're going to gather signatures and try to put a recreational question on the ballot for 2020. So, I think from the state's perspective, as it relates to policy, you have to understand, and I think the title of that book is interesting. I'd like to take a look at it. Is you have to understand the discriminatory element of the sentencing and how we're treating various things, and you don't want to. It's not that you don't want to think about it, but it's so deep, and it's we're only there 5 months out of the year. Kind of the point that I was making earlier. We're only there 5 months out of the year. It's not our full-time job. We don't know what we don't know, and so when we dig into the really deep stuff in Jefferson City, it makes everybody uncomfortable. I mean, it's just the reality of it. But I've seen more of it lately, and I will say, this is not a pejorative, statement towards my older colleagues, but I've seen the young guys, people my age and around that, be willing to dig in and have those conversations a little bit more vigorously, maybe than was before. And so and I'm seeing that in a whole host of areas, and so I think that's exciting. But I mean, based on what I heard today, the coalition that's forming, if the money's there, we may be a recreational state in 2021. I think that's entirely possible.
But if you're not careful, you end up like Colorado, where there's
Yep.
still an active black market because the tax is too high and it's too complicated.
Yeah.
And that's not going to solve any problem.
Yeah. No, it's you got to find the balance, and if you don't, you can swing the pendulum too far.
Will Missouri work with the federal government on and bring policies together? Because there's going to have to be a change of law
Right.
at the federal level also.
I think, my assumption is the federal government, whether it's at the administrative level or at the legislative level, would be absolutely foolish to not see what's happening, and to get so far behind it that they, do a whole host of damage in not trying to make sure that what they're doing is reflective of what's happening in the country, right? So my answer would be I hope so, because if they don't, then you maybe solve a couple of problems over here, but you create a bunch of problems over here, right? So, and frankly, government's really good at that.
Tell you what, let's do a quick survey. Raise your hands if you support recreational marijuana use. You better put, I know you guys do. You CJ. Here's a question for you. Now, I come from local law enforcement and federal law enforcement. I notice there's an issue right now on reimbursement for counties.
Yep.
DOC, the thing I think counties charge, or their average ADP is 50%, the cost of housing one person is what, $40?
Yes.
$39, $40. Department of Corrections reimburses $22.50.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Not even close to what it's supposed to be.
There's a gap
There's a
there,
gap,
and
yeah,
and
there's a gap.
these small counties
There's a gap.
are eating it, but apparently there's some arrears here with the Department of Corrections and
Yeah.
payments back to the counties.
Yeah.
How will you resolve that?
So I think that it's twofold. I think the governor put, I don't remember the numbers, either 12 or 22 million, I think, to help with the arrearage issue. The policy issue is that, Missouri is the only state in the country that pays county jails for pretrial incarceration. Only state in the country. And so I think there was whether or not that's right or wrong, I think that policy has to change because it's what led to, and I'm not saying everybody's taking advantage of it, but the default was throw them in the county jail because we know we're going to get paid for it, right? And so, so that's not good on either side of the coin because sometimes they didn't need to be in the county jail; they need to be somewhere else. But if you're motivated by dollars, then you sometimes you do things that aren't maybe in the best interest of the situation. But we gotta get the arrears taken care of. I think we probably do that, if not this year in a 2-year window, and then hopefully by that time, the policy and kind of the variables around that policy have changed, so we don't get back into that hole again. Would be my guess.
Any other questions?
So what were the solutions for Kansas City, St. Louis, Columbia, and Springfield?
So the witness protection thing was one. It's 4-pronged, and I'm not going to be able to tell you all of them. I think the House, I'm pretty sure the House has filed bills on all of them. The other one is going to be some dollars for the, it's not a halfway house, but the triage mental health center in Springfield is going to be a pilot that I actually think it's in partnership with Burl down there, and I think if it's done the right way, I think it'd be a game changer because it helps a shortage of law enforcement resources, but also gets folks the proper treatment that they need at the time that they need it.
So it's strictly a diversion. Instead of moving them into
That's right.
incarcerated
That's right.
facilities, they move. Perfect.
That's right. And
That's
the thing that's always been, and this is not easy to do by any stretch of the imagination, but the thing that's always been frustrating to me is, government wastes a whole host of money, and it's not always intentional. It's not always us just saying, hey, here's our pet project and we're going to throw a bunch of money at it. It's not always that. Sometimes it's, again, we don't know what we don't know, and we in trying to do good things, we create programs that overlap with existing programs that are happening at the local level. And there's a tremendous amount of that the private sector or the local nonprofit sector can do tremendous work and can do it way better and way cheaper than the state government or the federal government could ever do it. And so that's one of the things that actually Governor Parson has tried to do is find those redundancies and say, okay, we know that we have a finite set of resources for in any area, but certainly in the area of criminal justice and recidivism resources, etc. What are we doing to make sure that that money goes the furthest that it possibly can? And so we don't always get that right. It's almost impossible just because of how big everything is. But I think even if you get it a little more right, potentially it can save a whole host of money and do some good.
You were talking about potentially building 2 new prisons if the trends continue.
Yeah.
Did the conversation ever come up about privatization of prisons?
Not very loudly. You know,
Okay, good.
certainly there were conversations. I mean, I've had that conversation with folks, but not ever to the point that it got serious.
Okay.
You know, at least that would be, at least not anything that I was part of.
Mose?
Yes, in terms of education, we are losing a lot of good teachers in other industry because of the low salaries and a lot of hoops and obstacles in front of them to be qualified and become a teacher. And please, when the things comes up in the Senate or whatever discussion you guys have, you have to increase the budget for education department because we are losing very smart teachers to other industry. That's, what do you say about that? What do you think about that?
Well, there's no question that that's true. You know, it's a universal issue at certainly at the K through 12 level and at the higher education level as well. It's an issue that there probably can't be, and there are no easy solutions, but this one's going to be even more complex because for us to say, you know, let's just say, I don't know what the number is, but let's just say the average teacher salary is $35,000 a year and we want to raise it to $50,000, obviously that expense, if taken on entirely by the state, would be an astronomical amount of money that we could never afford. And so what we're trying to do, and actually Governor Parson has put together some folks who are trying to look at this, is say, okay, knowing we can't entirely do that, what are other things? I mean, you mentioned too many hoops, you know, things like that. What can we do some things in that area? Can we do some things in, you know, potentially a tax credit area? Can we do some things that would, if we can't say you're going to make this much more money as a teacher in Missouri, or at least enough that makes it super duper attractive, what are the other things that we can do, to your point, that would say we want to make the environment for a teacher better, right? So I mean that's one thing that we're trying to work on, that I think, you know, could provide some value for the state and help with the problem. But it is a problem, and you know, I was at there was a teacher at Oakland Junior High Middle School in Columbia that got this national award a couple of weeks ago. She was surprised, and she got a $25,000 cash reward. It was a really, really neat deal. But I was reminded of, you know, being a teacher is a calling for sure, and you want to be able to provide opportunities to the greatest extent possible for men and women who have that calling to continue to do it, right? And so it's not that they're never going to lose. I mean, if they lose the fire, if they lose the desire, it's probably because of the things that you mentioned. They just can't afford to do it any longer. They're not having fun. And so we've got to try to figure out a way, you know, part of it's maybe something that can be done at state level. Part of it's the state working with local, you know, more local resources, local districts, local schools to provide, you know, some of those opportunities. There's no shortcut. I mean, it's a problem that is a universal problem around every state in the country, regardless of size or you know, really anything else. So, but it's a need for sure.
Do you play sport?
Do I play sports?
Do you?
I do. Yeah, I played baseball.
What's your prediction for Super Bowl?
Hey, yeah.
Oh boy.
And we need a point spread.
Yeah, I'm saying probably. I'm giving it 34-24 Chiefs. That's my shot. So it's been really cool actually. So the Stanley Cup was at the Capitol this week. Obviously the Blues have it, and that was neat. And so now we've been told that regardless of if the Chiefs win, that the Chiefs are coming. They're going to come down. Some Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and some others are going to come down later in the year. But hopefully they come with a Super Bowl trophy. That'd be pretty cool to have both of those in the state. So yeah, we're excited about that.
Any parting words of wisdom for our outstanding student body?
I'd say just keep it up. I mean, to my earlier point, if everything that you do and kind of your view of the world is motivated entirely by the stuff around you, it's gonna be a tough haul, because there's a whole lot of junk around you, frankly. But I think if you as what I call the next generation, if you're motivated by the right things, if your motives are pure, if you're engaged and energetic and saying, hey, I'm going to make a difference, the sky's always the limit. And that sounds cliche and maybe a little corny, but it really is. And I think the opportunities for the next generation are going to be really, really significant, because technology is going to continue to move forward. There's going to be so many new innovations and new developments, and by the time the cool stuff happens, I'm going to be old. But I'm excited to see it, and I think the one thing that I've learned, and I think Jefferson City has taught me to it in a little more grand detail, is you can only control the things that you can control. And if you get beat down by the stuff that you can't control, it's going to suck. It's not going to be good. But if you keep focused, if you keep your eyes on the prize, there are so many tremendous opportunities out there for folks who are willing to do it. And so I just say, keep up the good work. And it was exciting just to be a part of what you guys are doing tonight.
I didn't want to put any pressure on you, but this is the first series of what we're calling the professional series. So you're the first.
Oh, awesome!
You're the first guest.
Thank
man.
you.
This is so awesome.
Well, I set the bar low, and it'll go.
No, I didn't want to tell you before you got here. Too much pressure.
That's awesome.
Hey, listen, there's some pizza up there. Would you join us for some little pizza?
Sure, absolutely.
And,
Awesome.